also his future plans. Uh, so Dr. Mujahid Bilaji is a professor of sociology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and he's also associated with the CUNY Graduate Center. He has a PhD from University of Michigan in sociology. His research spans American Islam, Muslim communities, Kurdish identity, Turkish society, and religious social theory. His key publication, one that we will be spotlighting here, is his monograph, Finding Mecca in America, How Islam is Becoming an American Religion, which was published by the University of Chicago Press. And he recently co-authored a volume following similar paths, What American Jews and Muslims Can Learn from One Another, which was published by University of California Press. He is a widely recognized intellectual, both in America and around the world, for his expertise on civil rights and liberties, hate crimes, immigration, Islamophobia, and obviously the interplay of religion and social identity in America and in the Middle East. He is a frequent public speaker on issues of faith and citizenship and minority identity. He is also a faculty fellow at the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center. We welcome Dr. Mujahid Bilaji. Dr. Mujahid, the book that we are here to discuss obviously must have taken some time to put together and some forethought about what you had tried to accomplish. I give you the floor to kind of introduce the book, its background, and then we can have a discussion from there.
Thank you, Uwais, for the generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Dr. Sami Al-Aryan as well for inviting me to be here today. Finding Mecca in America is a book that is based on research on Muslim communities in the Midwest, particularly in Metro Detroit area, where a large, significant number of Muslims build a Muslim life beyond individual experience. It's a more kind of communal existence, and as such, it reflects or represents a threshold in Muslim experience in America. The book consists of two segments, two parts. I look at Muslim digestion of America as a new place, as a new space, as a domicile, as a new culture, and also efforts to insert Muslim identity or assert Muslim equivalence, Muslim membership in American society. So it has two components. We can get into details of those things later. In many ways, America is a frontier to Islam, and Islam is a frontier to America. And you can see frontier places are places of anxiety. So America has some anxieties about Islam, and Muslims have had in the past strong anxieties about America. And we can see that there has been a process of mutual naturalization over time. It's not an easy process. It's very agonizing. There are ups and downs, punctuated by events, by acts of exclusion, Islamophobic pressure, and sometimes incidents beyond the US borders also shaping that relationship. I would say Finding Mecca in America is a work that reflects the experience of Muslims in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So the last 2 decades are covered. So Muslims are at a slightly different moment, but we can come to that discussion towards the end of our conversation. Should I continue with the nature of the themes I cover?
I have, I mean, what you've shared with us is very interesting. I mean, I have some of my own questions, but I guess we can begin by laying out the historical context. So you said that, this is a book that is centered around the post 9/11 period specifically. And why did you choose that period? And how do you see the difference between the pre 9/11 and now also the historical moment we find ourselves in, as opposed to the actual moment of your study of the topic?
Yeah, I mean, right after 9/11, of course, the Muslim lives were just subject to unprecedented pressure, and it was a new moment. Definitely, I had to study it if we are doing Muslim studies. And I was particularly interested in how immigrant Muslims change over time in terms of their attitudes, in terms of their perception of the United States. Um, so it was like, my reaction to the new reality. So studying this topic was a choice, but also taking note of reality unfolding at that particular moment. Before 9/11, Muslims, the history of Islam in America, of course, dates back to uh, uh, its beginning. It's older than America itself, but certainly, according to various accounts that are being unearthed now, we have Muslim presence. Not Muslim presence is not something that can be reduced to immigration. Uh, uh, but the earliest significant communities are enslaved Africans who were brought to America. About 12 to 15% of enslaved people were Muslim from Senegambia region, from contemporary Senegal, and so on. These people are subject to conditions of slavery. Of course, they couldn't reproduce their faith, and Islam basically disappeared because of the conditions of slavery. It's a very strange situation. Under slavery, for example, you can't learn how to read and write, and it's considered dangerous, and so on, so that people can accept and basically disappear. So they became Christians. So some enslaved women says, Jesus built the temple in Mecca and so on, so that Christianity and Islam blends into each other and basically disappears. But then in the 20th century, we see a revival movement, African Americans trying to retrieve their identity and in looking for depth for their Black selfhood. Islam obviously offers civilizational depth and full alternative to Christian white culture. So the Nation of Islam was famously about popular movements as well. And these movements were in part rehabilitation of Black identity and in part a retrieval of Muslim identity from the past. It's a very American religion, and it's more American than Catholicism or even Protestantism, in the sense that they come from Europe, but this is built in America, like Mormonism. So in many ways, Black Muslim is an absolutely an American phenomenon. Muslim immigration, which becomes more significant in the post-1965 changes in immigration law of the United States, then we have more significant generations of presence in the United States, especially in the Midwest areas of Detroit. Post-1965, in terms of developing countries, and those that of course, depending on how this of course, can be a proper Muslim in America. How can we preserve our identity and even at all legitimate to be here? These questions were, if not all of them, and there were questions of legitimacy of America as a domicile for Muslims. As Muslim communities settled, they start to have families, and so on, their perception of America changed. And I discussed these moments of transition, looking at decades and dominant issues. You can today perception has totally changed. It is seen as a, you know, it's not cultures. Uh, uh, change. Uh, so Muslims finding themselves in the uh, they needed to incorporate implement required of codifications. Or so you cannot. So the question of Qibla arises as a question of basically finding your orientation, finding your area in a space. Man, if you are in a desert or an ocean, how do you know which way to go? From a jurisprudential point of fiqh perspective, it presented itself as a were praying uh, in mosques that were originally not built. And so they were sometimes density of immigrant community, and one of them was Albanian community, the other was Shia uh, uh, Muslims, and both of these communities had mosques that were oriented towards southeast. Now, for a long time, American Muslims prayed towards southeast. That was the Qibla up until they discovered, thanks to some experts and a few sessions of discussions and exploration, the conclusion was that actually northeast is the better and correct Qibla because of the projection map, Mercator map versus spherical thing. But basically what happens is in late 70s, early 80s, American Muslim community had to change their Qibla from southeast to northeast. And so those mosques that had those mihrabs facing southeast, now they had to establish or insert a new and so the phenomenon of Masjid al-Qiblatain, which we find only at the beginning of Islam, at its bidayah, its origins, you find it at its edges and its frontiers as well. And so you might say, how about African Americans? African Americans, Nation of Islam folks, were also praying actually in a chaotic manner. They were praying towards Chicago in Detroit because the headquarters were there. And Nation of Islam was an amalgamation of Islam and Christianity in terms of forms, more Christian, content was increasingly more Muslim. It was more of an identity movement. And being an American, this is totally legitimate. It's you are trying to be Muslim as an American based on your particular context. Sometimes immigrant Muslims do not pay due respect to this fact that this is also Islam. This is another Muslim experience, and it's of course better. And it turns out eventually, actually, there is convergence of these two indigenous and immigrant experiences. But they were also facing that. And after the death of Elijah Muhammad and Waridin Muhammad coming to power, they change the Qibla as well. It becomes now concordant with, mainstream Sunni Muslim Qibla. So I use this question of Qibla or finding Mecca as a metaphor, but also it's a kind of real story that reflects what Muslims experience in their search for life, proper life in America, proper both in terms of Islam, also proper in terms of this new context. Muslims were raising interesting questions about other aspects of life there. English language, for example. Can the English language be a, I guess, legitimate medium for expressing Islamic idioms? Can English properly express Islam? Now it's totally strange to us, and the second and third generations have totally forgotten this type of debates. But in the 70s, people debated those things. They were, Ismail Raji Al-Faruqi has a book. It's called Islamic English, and yeah, probably you observed some of those discussions. And so English was associated with colonialism and with missionaries in most of the Muslim geographies. And overcoming that anxiety was also a generational change and also a question of embracing American culture. Language is an important part of it. Time had to be digested. Muslims use lunar calendar, and modern Western culture uses solar calendar. How are we going to find synchrony, if you wish? If you are Muslim, if you work at a professional environment, and Eid is approaching, and you want to ask for time off, how do you know when is the Eid? If you are following lunar calendar, you won't be able to tell the answer to this question. You have to wait the last second. So there was the discrepancy between Muslim time sense and Protestant tempo, if you wish, Protestant ethic of punctuality and predictability. Entire modern life is based on predictability. We schedule, we plan, and we act according. So this led to debates within, and this is an ongoing debate actually. It's called moon sighting, sometimes ironically called moon fighting, in terms of whether to use naked eye sighting or to use astronomical calculation. Muslims also saw America as a problematic place. Is it Islamic as a domicile? Okay, we are here, but should we feel we belong here or not? And so there is this medieval juridical distinction, legal distinction between Darul Harb and Darul Islam. Darul Harb basically means a place of chaos, a place where there isn't law, there is no nomos. Muslim life hasn't been deployed in that place, therefore we don't know how to navigate in that space. Okay, so you can say a place of conflict would fall under that, but an unfortunate place would also fall under Darul Harb. Okay, Harb is also haram. It's a leveled place, ruins, not paved. There are traffic signs. So Muslim immediate reactions, early reactions, of course, I'm not saying all Muslims acted or thought along those lines, but some people really felt like, this is a, kuffar country, and we will just do our job and just leave, get our knowledge from universities, and then we will go back to our home countries. As they stayed longer, their perception changed because they start to think that, well, we are here because we can do dawah, we can serve Islam, we can serve goodness. And in that sense, America is incorporated into Muslim imagination as a resource, as a place where you can serve Islam, serve common good. This notion would gradually be replaced by another one, which is Darul Aqd, where America is seen as a place where Muslims enjoy relative freedom. We don't harm anyone, they don't harm us. So, even though it's not a Muslim country, we are free to practice Islam here. Therefore, there's a mutual respect. That type of early social contract mentality emerges among American Muslims. And gradually, even this is not enough. The pressure after 9/11, Muslims being excluded, being pressured, how do you can't just say, okay, they don't harm me. Now you have to claim your existence. You have to say, I'm a citizen, I have the rights, I'm equal to you. And so the citizenship ethics starts to show itself up. And now Muslims start to embrace American values, making them compatible with Islam. They discover that actually American Constitution is compatible with Sharia. It's actually almost an expression of it. So Maqasid al-Sharia and the basics of American law, and you can trace it to thinkers like John Locke and others. So this conceptual work and also necessity gave rise to the idea that America is a Muslim place. Muslims should feel at home here, should claim their citizenship here, and so on. So this juridical distinction that's an archaic and actually quite irrelevant to contemporary life. People like Tariq Ramadan, for example, they argue that the whole world is Darul Dawah, Darul Islam. It's open, it's an open call, and the nature of Islam is not about that particular land. It's not about a particular geography. This transformation that that American Muslims underwent is a reflection of Muslim ideas becoming more practical through experience, and so. Today, we can talk about American Muslim patriotism. So Muslims have a much more, how to put it, a closer more intimate relationship with American values and American Constitution. This is not just an instrumental thing in terms of protecting Muslims against non-Muslim attacks. People saying you are not American, you're un-American, you're a terrorist, and this and that. But also, Muslims are much more culturally literate about American culture and its history and its experience. And so their analysis of their reality, both as Muslims who are facing the need to do ijtihad about their own conditions, and their capacity to read and understand their environment has matured over time. So we are arguably at the moment of American Muslim patriotism, Muslims engaging in what can be called American patriotism in a way that upholds Islam and legitimizes Muslim existence in America. When 9/11 happened, of course, it was a terrible moment for Muslims. Muslims were persecuted, and the Muslims could no longer stay inactive. So it was a new situation. You had to be proactive. And so among the things Muslims did was civil rights activism. Organizations like Council on American Islamic Relations and many others, new ones emerged. They engaged in bringing Muslim bodies and American rights together, because a lot of Muslims didn't know how to defend themselves. What do you say if police knocks on your door, for example? You have to know the law to defend yourself. It's not like you have the rights. Rights make sense only if you claim them, if you know how to use them. So you can think of Muslim body, Muslim life as especially if you are coming from some authoritarian country, let's say you are coming from Syria, you don't have democracy, you don't practice idea of rights so much. In America, how do you, practice? So it created a impetus, a pressure for Muslims to enter into American civic mentality, to equip themselves with civic culture, civic virtues, for example, starting to care about others, not just yourself. So this public Muslims entering American public life, claiming civil religion is an important part. So Muslims also engaged in interfaith conversations. Now you recognize that your freedom depends on other people's freedom. You respect them if you are expecting respect. So interfaith conversations also took interesting turns. One of the themes that became prominent is Abraham. Prophet Abraham in Islamic tradition has a place, of course, is a major prophet and so on. But in American Muslim context is much more important than that, because Abraham is a figure that allows Muslims to establish kinship with Jews and Christians, and it provides a path for non-Muslims to understand Muslims as familiar, as kin. This is, of course, a struggle. There's a constant effort on the part of some groups to make Muslims look foreign, threatening, unlike Christian, and so on. And this propaganda continues even today, although American people are waking up to the reality that actually Islam has much more commonality with Christianity than other, even Abrahamic traditions. So-called Judeo-Christian tradition itself is an entity that came into being after 1950s. And if we are going to pair things, it turns out actually, the overlap and the mutual respect is higher among Christians and Muslims, should be higher, let's put it that way. But the practical politics and the amount of propaganda that goes into distorting the facts about the Muslim-Christian similarities is a challenge that Muslims have to deal with. It's a question that even today, let's say, Mamdani, right, is facing billionaires pouring money into a campaign to demonize him, to make him look less American, less acceptable to average citizen who are not equipped with proper knowledge. So in that sense, this type of activities are going to continue. They might take different shapes. Sometimes, well, people say, I don't care about Abraham, but I respect other people. So is it multicultural diversity that you are going to take as a path as Muslim? Or is it Abrahamic kinship model, like we are cousins, we are all children of Abraham? So Muslims were facing this kind of question. If you are on the left and liberal, you go with the multicultural diversity. If you are more conservative, you go through the kinship model. You say we are cousins, so don't hurt us, and that kind of discourse. Islamophobia was a major dehumanization act, Islamophobia that emerged after 9/11. All this, Patriot Act, legal changes that were targeting Muslims, cultural media representations that were demonizing Muslims. So how do Muslims rehumanize themselves? One of the ways they did, and I covered that in the book as a chapter, is the emergence of Muslim stand-up comedy. Muslim comedians, a Muslim smiling is a rarity, right? In the media, angry Muslim is represented all the time. So Muslim ethnic comedy made Muslims like Italians, Puerto Ricans, blacks, Jews, and whatnot, various American ethnicities that enter into American public life, and they represent themselves in ways that educate the public about their inner life, their identity. Muslim comedians, they literally used airport as a way of talking about Muslim experience. So the Muslim comedian stage was an airport security area. So because at the airport, Muslim identity is heightened, highlighted, it becomes most visible, it becomes most dangerous. And so Muslim ethnic comedy played the role of showing Muslims as individual, as funny. When you are funny, when you can laugh together, you become human. It has a magic, like eating together, has that magic. Laughing together, sohbah, conversation, humanizes you. People who want to dehumanize people, they will depict them as foreign, they shout, they can't speak, for example. They are angry. It's all forms of alienation. Okay. And then, of course, calling them animals, subhuman, this and that are even more radical forms where you are basically justifying killing them. And so Muslim identity struggled very hard in the last 2 decades to show that Muslims are human beings. We are human, we are citizen, and we are American. These 3 things, I would say, is well encapsulated in the image of flag hijab. In America, you might have seen that there is a hijab that is a flag. And American Muslim women who were targeted by Islamophobes because of hijab makes their Muslim identity much more visible than Muslim male identity can pass as undetected. But hijab definitely shows you are Muslim. That kind of gestures, embrace of American flag as hijab, and so it does 2 things. 2 sacreds basically meet in flag hijab, American flag and hijab. So Muslims became much more sophisticated in terms of countering all those attacks, Islamophobic attacks, and we have to note that many of them were actually orchestrated by Zionists who need to demonize Muslims for their own political purposes in Palestine. But American Muslims are working hard to establish their humanity with respect to the rest of American society. And figures like Mamdani are people who have gone through this arduous process of civic learning. When you know what kind of accusations, insults, exclusions you are going to face, then you cultivate responses. And so American Muslim community moved from a kind of passive recipient of insults and discriminations. Now they are fighting back to establish themselves. In doing so, they are gradually finding representation in politics. Of course, American politics is mostly colonized by particular interest groups. However, American Muslims are finding small outlets of representation. So a couple of Muslim politicians are reflected, they are part of the American Congress, House of Representatives. You can look at the generations of them, like the first generation of 2 Muslim politicians were actually African Americans. They were mostly dealing with social issues. New generations are more activist type, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and so on. And now with Mamdani, I think we see a new generation of politicians who are much more refined, much more established and grassroots in many ways. So there are a lot of reasons to be very optimistic about the future of Islam in America, because Islam is an American religion, both historically and practically. From democratic point of view, even if you came yesterday, you still have the same rights. You should have the same rights. It's only nativistic racist policies or attitudes of some people that want to demonize Muslims. But Muslims are not recent, although some immigrants are recent. Overall, we have been part of America, and founding fathers were actually they were very sympathetic to Islam. They were mostly deist. They were more Muslim than Christian, if you will. You don't have to carry the label, but they were closer intellectually to a Muslim understanding of and today we can really observe an emerging new situation. And that is the great awakening of American people. American people are waking up. This is partly because of the genocide in Gaza that forced a lot of Americans to wake up because their humanity couldn't tolerate the inhumanity and the cruelty that has been displayed. And so a lot of people are questioning, and the misrepresentation of Muslims together with the genocide being perpetrated, and Muslim dignity being displayed by oppressed Muslims, led a lot of Americans to question this new situation, and they start to say, "Hey, wait a second, you know, maybe Muslims are not what we are presented, what we are told they are." And this new development is something I think that is going to take shape, and it's going to determine how Muslims will strategize in terms of reaching out to their fellow citizens, other Americans. And I think more and more Christians are becoming appreciative, more understanding towards Islam. They realize that Muslims respect Jesus, for example. Are shocked. Even Charlie Kirk, who was, you know, given millions to be anti-Muslim, and when he was shocked when he was speaking to some Christian Arab who told him that there are many churches and Muslims respect Christianity and so on. So those kind of encounters are happening increasingly because of the nature of politics and conflicts that generate images, debates, and Muslims, I think, are going to have to rethink about how they position themselves. So Islam is no longer a foreign thing to America. It's internal to America. It's part of American history. Every community has to give depth to themselves. So you find the earliest people, Italian Americans, Irish, they were considered un-American. Catholics were not considered American. They had to prove that they are good Americans. And now no one is asking if Catholics are American. No one is going to ask if Muslims are American. Hopefully after Mamdani's victory, there will be, we will be done with that kind of question.
Or at least a certain kind of Muslim is American.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, of course, there's a question of great point. There's a question of course, American experience, American context gives rise to a certain Muslim form. It cannot be found somewhere else because it reflects the reality of that particular place and time. And this is totally normal for Islam. Islam owes its universality in its ability to travel across geography and time, because it's a matter of principles. You don't have to be Arab, you don't have to be Turkish to be Muslim, you don't have to like this food or that food. Islam is a universal call to human brotherhood. As such, it's what Christianity intended to achieve, and Islam completed the expansion, if you will, in terms of coverage. And so I think Western Islam is going to be a significant part of Muslim world in the future. And it's going to be a source for generation of new fiqh, new jurisprudence, new thinking. So it won't be like, okay, let's import Islam from Egypt, from Cairo to New York, but now maybe from California to Cairo as well, there will be export of Islam, of American, made in America by Muslims, and that's perfectly Islamic. It's totally normal. This, of course, with the caveat that American foreign policy, which has been cruel towards Muslims and other parts of the world, because of people who are steering it towards certain group interests and lobby, strategic preferences. As Americans wake up to the reality and reclaim their country, and they will discover that American values and Islamic values are actually not that different. That moment is a possibility. And if Muslims work hard and Americans wake up more, that time might come, quite quickly. Someone like Tucker Carlson moved from conservative, mouthpiece of some, I don't know, Fox News or something over time, thanks to this decentralization of news and so on, with the rise of social media, alternative forms of information and so on. Now, a lot of people like him who were, conservative Christian, they are more open to Islam now, not because some Muslims did some, particular work on them, or it's not an activity of, missionary work on them, but the truth about Islam is no longer foreign to Americans and the globalization, and the truth itself makes itself felt in the conscience of people who are righteous, who are truthful. So deception is always temporary. It's not gonna last forever. And that's what should give hope to people like Muslims who believe in truth, who are righteous. And, we might be, facing injustice, cruelty right now. But as long as we cling to the truth, people of conscience will be on our side. So it's not our side that we should be claiming, it's the side of righteousness. And to that extent, Muslims are also under the test of being good. And so Islam, therefore, American Islam, is a new strand of Islam. It's another pocket, another component, another continent of Islam in the global universal landscape that we call Muslim experience. And so I observe this kind of stuff. I can talk more about other aspects, but I think
I think that you have laid out a very comprehensive picture, right, about the beginnings of American Islam, and then the different, ebbs and flows of this identity construction over such a long period of time. And I think we have such short-term memories as, just our own lack of documentation, also interest, that we forget how deep-rooted the experience of Islam is in America. And I think that your work really highlights these. Some of it is a natural study of how new groups, right, integrate into larger fabrics of cultural appropriation. But if I could maybe ask you about, so we had at SIGA a few year or two ago, a professor named Joseph Massad.
Yeah.
And Joseph Massad's thesis was something interesting. He argued two things. Number one is that Islam is actually not alien to Western identity or liberalism, and that in fact the very construction of liberalism requires Islam as an other, as a site of projection of its own failures. And that this isn't a story about something new being introduced to something old, but rather that Islam and Muslims and the Arab, the Middle Eastern, the Near Eastern, is constitutive of the very fabric of Western American identity. And this isn't something that can be washed away very easily. And only that, genocide or ethnic cleansing of Muslims in the West is also constitutive of American culture. What we see in Gaza today is not something alien to American values, but it is constitutive. And this is an argument that has been forwarded by Joseph Massad, and also one of our professors here at Koç University, who just released a long essay. His name is Şentürk, I think. No, not Rajab
No,
Shenab.
it's not religion.
The one at Koç University, his name is Şener.
Yeah, Şener Aktürk.
Şener Aktürk, who just released like a long essay in which he speaks about how constitutive genocide and ethnic cleansing, especially targeting Muslims, is to the construction of Western identity. Alongside that, you know, we have ongoing the issue that we have of, you know, alongside that we have the issue of American foreign policy, which you've touched on.
Yeah.
Which has now we know from new revelations that the war on terror was not something that was instigated from outside, but was a strategy from within. That it was not some Zionist plot, but was actually something that was aided and abetted through intelligence organizations from Saudi Arabia and America, and that it was used as a pretense to curtail civil liberties of Muslims and demonize Islam again, but not in a new fashion. This has always been a trope of Americanism and
Okay.
American Islam. So
Yeah.
maybe we could
Yeah.
talk about those
Yeah, I would
things.
like to respond to a discussion about liberalism. I think there are two dimensions to this question. Islam is internal, not just as externality, as an enemy. You know, it's part of the liberal tradition or Western culture as a kind of enemy figure that has always been there.
Yeah,
But also, you can argue that internally it is part of it. I mean, liberalism is a secular articulation of Islam in some sense. People like John Locke were really influenced, and Muslims discovered this. So there are two strands of thinking here at play. One is mostly academic and critical of America, and America deserves all kinds of criticism. There is no doubt about it. Given its foreign policy, its failure with respect to human rights, and the facts of genocide, its record is, you know, certainly deserves more criticism than it receives. There is no doubt about it. But it will be a mistake for Muslims to let Western civilization or culture go and be something external to Islam. Muslims are inside it, part of it, have influenced it. So there are certain virtues, certain positive aspects that Muslims can and I think should claim that it's for the better of humanity overall. Even in Islam, you are never enemy of people. You are enemy of enmity, of the bad behavior, of you know, disbelief, whatever it is. But you know, there is always hope that people can correct themselves. They can be better. They might have acted on the basis of some, you know, ignorance, neglect, deception by somebody else. So, practically speaking, Muslim communities who are looking for legitimacy, belonging within America, they emphasize commonalities with American culture and civilization, Western culture and civilization. Muslims in the academics, they really care less about how they shape the reality. They are more interested in the sophistication of their argument, and you know, the spread of post-colonial theory, for example, is just out of proportions today. I think it's not healthy. Muslims should claim not victimhood. We are not victim. You know, Muslims, we are the owners. We are people of dignity. When you embrace victimhood, it corrupts you over time. And Zionism is a perfect example of victimhood turning into cruelty. So even though Muslims are victimized in terrible ways, including genocide, Muslims should not embrace the idea of eternal victimhood. And anti-Western attitude, while it is justified as a, you know, local tactical thing, as a necessary thing at times, But Western civilization, what is Western civilization? They got some good stuff from Christianity. They questioned it. They came closer. Islam continued as enlightenment in the West. And we see a lot of literature showing how Enlightenment ideas were influenced by Muslims. Now, leftist, Marxist, post-colonial academic discourse loves to critique the mainstream culture of the West. That's fine. That's like citizens criticizing their government to be better, to be more fair, just, and so on. And they should do that. But Muslim and Muslim world, broader Muslim community, global Muslim community, our attitude, I think, as a Muslim, I would say, should not be one of just criticism. We are more interested in Islam, in reform, improvement, and giving opportunity for people to correct themselves. Not turning them into enemy, because turning people into your enemy is a comfortable position because you become innocent. If you are a victim, you are pure like a baby, innocent. But it's a very corrupting thing. You don't have responsibility there. Everything that happens to you is happening. Why? Because they are racist. But sometimes you have failures. I can see this among Kurds in Turkey, for example. If you are a Kurd, you say Turks are oppressing us, they're, fascist, racist, and so on. And, some of that is true, but some of it is a cover for your failures, that you can be lazy because you are a victim. Islam is the religion that eliminates servitude of man to man. And, it abolishes, subordination of man to man. It's liberation of man from man. And as such, I think, as much as we can let the language of post-colonial, resistance and critique of the West, from Muslim point of view, I find it narrow, insufficient for Muslim needs. From pragmatic point of view, insufficient for Muslim needs, and in the long run, harmful to Muslim.
If we isolate the leftist critique that people like maybe Joseph Massad has put forward, and we kind of focus our attention to the right, we see even scarier picture, right? Like we see a scarier picture because as I follow Trump and those around him who are looking for the Christianization of America, part of that story is wiping Muslims off the map. So, the genocidal values of the West become even more prevalent in that side of the camp, because what we see is, for example, anti-Sharia laws, we see anti-BDS laws, anti-Semitism laws, all of which are being used in order to, try to eliminate Islam in the West. And that is for America. For example, the question of, and I was very interested in your depiction of Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb, and these different kinds of innovations that Muslims have used to try to find themselves in new contexts. In the colonial context, when Muslims dealt with this question of non-Muslim governance, Yusha Patel recently has wrote a book on the imperative distinctiveness, the role of what is sometimes called in fiqh, Shi'ar al-Islam, which is basically the public display of Islamic rights, like, for example, the ability to be able to have adhan on the loudspeaker, right? Or Jummah khutbahs, for example, the call for jihad, for example, aiding and abetting righteous jihad, for example, and there's many of these things that, that fall into this category. And, colonial people saw that Dar al-Harb, where this public display of Islam is threatened, for example, the hijab controversy that you rightly pointed out, this would be what would be considered Dar al-Harb, because your public display. Now, individual piety is one thing, and I think that individual individual piety, because of the space of freedom that is allowed by, American law, there's no problem there. But when we start moving into the public display of Islam, that's where we encounter the most heightened forms of Islamophobia in the West. And these things, according to modern positions, put it in a kind of a gray category from the security of Muslim life.
Yeah. American right sounds scary, scarier than it is. And all those terrible things you discussed in terms of threats coming from American right, most of it is actually the work of Zionism. American right wing, if they truly, if they are sincere in their Christianity, if they truly know Muslims, they are more sympathetic than they appear right now. We see this transformation happening right now, actually, in I don't know, podcasters here, and if you are Muslim, you want to live in the West. Of course, if you are a minority, there are limitations. As Muslim, even you have to recognize that fact. Sha'air would the idea that if you are, let's say, in Dearborn, right, you want to have a loudspeaker.
Yeah.
If there is enough Muslim density, American law, American culture already opens space for that, and there are a couple of places where Muslims have the call to prayer adhan through loudspeaker. That's perfectly doable. The question is actually whether identity politics is the right way for Muslims that goes through, I don't know, progressive discourse, language of diversity, and so on, or a more honest engagement with the American society, not as mediated by identities, but as human beings. With American right, including Donald Trump, who is a horrible person, but is a person nevertheless. And Biden might be a better politician but he's not a person. The personality, the humaneness, even when your enemy is human, there is chance they can understand you. But if your enemy is a robot, is a bureaucratic tool of some interest group, then you don't have any chance, despite your counterpart talking about humanity, diversity, respect, this and that, which is what happened. I think Muslims need to give a chance to American conservative culture, which needs to be, of course, liberated and from distortion induced on it by other interest groups. I think Americans are gonna be more tolerant to Islam if they are allowed to be Christian, as Christians. What has happened in American politics in recent years is that identity politics was exaggerated to a point where it started to harm everybody, and it doesn't serve Muslims anymore. For a while it did, of course, but now trans rights or LGBT concerns are much more important than genocide for some people. Symbolic stuff away from actual real issues. And so there's a revolt against this. Muslims cannot insist on that. Muslims don't have the power to say, oh, okay, let's be diverse and they will just accept it. No, Muslims have to face this new reality with honesty, sincerity, truthfulness, and personality. We are Muslim, we are here, we are citizens, we are humans. Let's have a conversation. Yes, we love Jesus too, and we love it really. People who say that Muslims hate Christians, hate Jesus, hate Americans, maybe they hate Americans, that's why they tell you this. Let's have a conversation. And so that new window is opening, and Muslims need to invest their heart in this new opportunity. All discourse of diversity and identity politics, which allowed Muslims to breathe among other identities, and we should be grateful for that. It was taken to the extreme, and when something transcends its right dosage, it turns into poison. And so American public is reacting, and Donald Trump is a reflection of this revolt in American public. We have to respect American people's feelings and their sense of their need for respect, their need for recognition, so that we Muslims in America can have the same thing.
I want to continue the conversation and open it up to the other participants here. They've came a long way. Some people have come to listen to you. So I want to invite any questions that may be here from a politician, from the people here. Please introduce yourself, state your name and your question, and then I will repeat it for the sake of the live stream. Any questions? Yeah, Dr. Sami, who is our director of the center, for his first.
Thank you very much for the presentation. To invite any memories, because I lived all these debates from the mid-70s. And I remember when the African Americans, this was about when Elijah Muhammad died and his son took over. So I saw all the transformations taking place. Actually, they call it the mosque, but it was actually Judaism, like church. They used to play on Sundays rather than Fridays. So they had, and then the conversion started going, and I could see this convergence. And it is an American experience, as you pointed out. And I think it's very important to highlight within the American context and also within the slavery experience, because Islam for them was a revolt, how to get out of those chains that they felt under for centuries. So Islam came as a response, but it was not the Islam that people knew in the Islamic world. It's different Islam. And even the terminology were changing. And then the two things basically came together. And so it's an interesting observation. And I didn't even Elijah Muhammad in person. And I can tell you that he's changed a lot, even after taking over until his death. It became more mainstream. Also, there was an American flavor into this. So that's an important experience to know and to understand. On the issue of the debate that was among the immigrants, you're right about how the Muslim immigrants started coming in the mid-60s, but even by the mid-70s, there were enough numbers. Then the issue became more of whether or not people will go back to finish their education, mostly students. And if you were coming from a repressive country, it became very difficult for you to go back. So you find those pioneers who started these kind of debates coming, either Palestinians or refugees, or perhaps Syrians or Iraqis, or even Iranians during the Shah, or other, even Afghanis, because by the end of 1970s, with the in Afghanistan, as well as other people it became very important. Are you going to stay? And if you stay, what institutions do you build? And what is, this whole thing about Islam really didn't make sense, because if you go back to the original, and then we started getting all these scholars coming in, like the Qaradawi, start asking questions about these things. And now you could see that you are more free to practice Islam in America than in any other country, actually, when you go back. So these terms really didn't make much sense. So this is a very important, it deserves actually a whole study. And I can tell you, within even the organized Islamic groups, there were officials, there were intense debates and even hard feelings about this, because most of the Islamic movements back in the Islamic world were secret. Because they couldn't go public because they would be persecuted. And people in the West didn't feel that they had to be secret. So what do you do about that? Today was very tense. Yeah, I think it's clear. On the issue of civil rights, it did not start after 9/11. I can tell you from personal experience. You know, it actually started way before. And the same could be said about Islamophobia. I can trace back Islamophobia even to the people who started it and to the documents they produced. Right after, of course, there were many notions. You can read Edward Said and others about this, but that's not the organized movement to target Muslims. This movement to target Islam and Muslims in the West can be traced back to two events. One, the end of the Cold War, and even before that. See, the end of the Cold War, there was a search for an enemy. But that happens towards 1989, 1991. But before that, 3 years before that, I can tell you that the emergence of Islamophobia came to the Intifada, the Intifada. I could see how Israelis who were associated with Mossad and other intelligence and other agencies came to the US to start demonizing Palestinians and Palestinians. They established institutions and they start producing books, Target America, Target the West, Target Canada, same book, same author. He established a task force within Congress, associated themselves with some congressional offices and congressional Congress people, and they started espousing these kind of things. And then you have the transformation of some right-wing Zionist organizations who were mainly focused on terrorism, Arab terrorism, Palestinian terrorism, but very little about Islam. Now, by the emergence of the Second Intifada, Islamic groups became prominent. So now they became,
from Arab to
Islam
Muslim.
and the ideology. So this is how we can trace back Islamophobia, but also that's when civil rights became. And before 9/11, there was secret evidence used against us Muslims, targeting them and all that. So the civil rights, so even CAIR and other groups became more prominent and more active after 9/11. These things came way before that. And I can give you even legislation for the Patriot Act. The first draft, I saw a version of it in 1995. 6 years before it actually passed. So they were preparing because why did that happen? Because of the 93 war tricks and bombing. So they want to target Muslims, but it was very difficult to pass at the time. So they passed a little version of it in the 1996 immigration law, which allowed secret evidence, but they couldn't pass the whole thing. On the issue of, maybe that's my final comment, the issue of the question of reform. I believe we have to put it in the proper context because each one has a different paradigm, and that's where the tension comes. If you live in the West and you are within a Western paradigm, enjoying certain things which probably they may find as a Muslim intellectually, you may find even roots, either in Islamic jurisprudence or even Islamic principles, which you don't have to start from scratch. You can start from, as long as it does not contradict your beliefs. And reform then becomes necessary, and not even necessary, because it's the only way forward, because the revolution within that context is not going to be received, because that at the end is a Western experience. And all what you're trying to do is to reform it because you live in there. But that can't be said the same thing if you live in this part of the world, in the Islamic world. The Islamic world, which has been under intense secularization by Western thought and Western books. We're talking about military conquest, colonialism, and so on and so forth. It is not a question of reform because the experience here is different. It really has to be more of a, not just a critique of Western philosophy. And I'm not talking about Western philosophy in its benign form. And this is what actually gives credence to all the attempts to teach lessons to the Muslims and try to Westernize. Then it becomes not a question of reform. I think it will be a question of evolution, meaning that you really have to go to the essence, because whatever Western thought and Western philosophy was developed in the Western context, particularly when it comes to issues of religion and the biggest influence on society, and we can't start from there. So it becomes, it can't be reformed. So this whole notion about Islamization of knowledge, for example, which is a movement that started in the West. It might work somehow in the West, but within the Islamic context, you can't just bring Islam, economics and redefine profit and redefine using into profit and redo these cosmetic things. So this is Islamic now, economics, and this is Islamic anthropology, and this is Islamic sociology, and this is Islamic political science. I think that's the wrong way of defining. You really have to go deep into these things, how they develop, and start going to your roots, and not just having some kind of a criticism, but to develop your own model outside these models. Yes, you have to know them, but you can't rely on them.
Yeah.
So you have two different approaches, and sometimes because people may have developed them in the West, they think it has value in the East. I think that is a wrong approach.
Mhm.
I mean, that's my 2 cents here, very quickly on some of these things.
Thank you for your contributions.
We still have a few minutes, so I'd like for you to maybe respond to Dr. Sami and then also maybe make some closing remarks, and we'll wrap up the session.
Yeah, very briefly, thank you on multiple points. Your elaboration added extra layers to some of the points I raised. On the question of reform, of course, Muslims who are domestic to American environment, their needs and their analysis will be different from Muslims who are outside. And of course, if you are on the receiving end of American foreign policy or Western political military system, Muslim attitude, of course, has to be again constructive, not just limited to critique and defensiveness and victimhood discourse. Muslims need to build on themselves, and this positive conduct, so that you become a good example for others and strong against your adversaries. And that involves, doing more than cosmetic changes to something that is Western. You paint it to green and it's Islamic. Those kind of things, of course, don't work. Power is a reality, and Muslims need to have it without becoming slaves of power, without subjecting their principles to the logical power. This is a mistake many others have done in the past, and that led them to oppression of others. That's why I find it important that Muslim societies, those who have space, maneuvering space to gain their autonomy, act sovereignly, that is to say, build their defense capabilities, invest in knowledge. So that's certainly the path to go for Muslims. And to do that, of course, you have to analyze what you have. Some Muslims have resources. Somebody has oil, another has population, another has military capability. This need to be strategically unified, and leadership is a part of this picture. So yes, when it comes to war and politics, you will engage in diplomacy and resistance and war in the name of justice, in the name name of self-defense. Muslims need to be strong. We're not really talking about Muslims, appeasing to America or accepting some soft versions that work within Western system, because most of the time, frequently people make the mistake of comparing a country like Turkey, for example, to Switzerland or to Belgium, and that's a great mistake. Belgium, it doesn't need much defense. It's part of a larger whole. It's up to, until recently was protected by United States. All this whole military monstrous scale military capability was protected. Of course, you can be a democracy and enjoy your life, but the moment that's lifted, suddenly you see Europeans. They are now, they change their attitude. So Muslims are not going to be blind to the realities of secular phenomena such as power, military strength, population, and so on. I personally believe that Muslims have enough raw material resources in terms of cultivating a dignified existence politically, strategically in the world. And Turkey is going to play a significant role in this. I think this is a responsibility for people of Turkey, Turks and Kurds. They need to unite and act together and with Arabs. And so this is a common good for humanity if Muslims stand up for their rights, for their dignity. Western civilization is blind to questions of justice when it comes to other people. They will talk about, of course, human rights, this and that, but when it comes to politics, it's self-interest, it's domination, genocide. Being spectator of genocide, watching it, is as bad as perpetrating it. So there is no way anything I say is justifying Western powers. But it means that Muslims have to work hard, but also we have a share in Western civilization. We'll claim our share there too. That's important because there are Muslim societies, Bosnians, Albanians, Euro Muslims, American Muslims, Canadian Muslims. That too is not just a strategic existence, presence of Muslim population, but also it's part of the larger picture of a Muslim contribution to global peace. And I will conclude with that. Thank you for.
Thank you so much. I want to extend my warm and very sincere thanks to Dr. Mojahed Biligi for joining us here at Samospat bin Zaim University. His insights and his research has been very insightful for us. We're excited to learn about the developments of American Muslims and American Islam. A very interesting anthropological case on the, as you said, the frontiers of Muslim civilization. And I would like to invite all of those who are listening and joining us to our next events that will be forthcoming in the next month. We have a seminar and a book series planned for each month. Please stay tuned. And for all those who joined us here in person, thanks for coming. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Such a great conversation. Thanks.